Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for this special order hour, which we have decided to devote to the life and career of an extraordinary former colleague, Ron Dellums, the giant who has fallen and whose death has deeply affected this body. So we've invited members who have reminiscences and appreciations to come forward and to participate in remembrance of the life of Ron Dellums. I just have a few things to say. I never had the good fortune of serving with Congressman Dellums, but he was a very close friend of my family. So I grew up admiring him as a little boy. He was an incredibly warm and dynamic, charismatic, and brilliant man who really exuded love of people wherever he went. And among his many extraordinary achievements in public life, one of them was to bring into politics and government service our distinguished colleague, Barbara Lee, who succeeded him in office and who will be taking over the special order hour after I say just a few words. But we should not understate the importance of that achievement. Congresswoman Lee served as his chief of staff for many years. She'll tell you that story. And then he backed her for the seat that he occupied, and so she is the proud and worthy successor to Congressman Dellums. But I wanted to say that in a professional field where so many participants are known for putting their finger up to the wind and following simply what the pollsters or campaign donors are telling them to do, Ron Dellums was a diamond in the rough from day one. He always put his ideals and his values first, and he didn't waver from them no matter how politically tough it became. He was raised in a politically engaged environment. His father was a longshoreman who was deeply involved in the labor movement, and his uncle, Cottrell Lawrence Dellums, was instrumental in helping A. Philip Randolph organize the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters before being elected president of that union in 1966. Now, Ron, when he graduated from high school, enlisted in the United States Marine Corps and spent several years in the Marines before an honorable discharge. He went on to college and to receive his master's in social work and became a psychiatric social worker in the California Department of Mental Hygiene. He was elected to the Berkeley City Council in 1967 at the age of 32, and he was deeply involved in the movement against the Vietnam War, which profoundly affected his political outlook and his development as a leader, and he was elected to Congress in 1972. I will allow my colleagues to talk about the various legislative efforts they were involved in with Congressman Dellums, but I'll say when I was in college, he was a great hero to college students across the country and to anti-apartheid activists, not just across America, but across the world, for his leadership for comprehensive sanctions against South Africa, the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act of 1986, which was passed as a culmination of a movement that he organized that involved civil disobedience at the South African embassy. And I was very proud to have played a tiny part in that as a college student, to have come and participated and submitted to arrest along with thousands of other people who did that at that time in order to galvanize public opinion against American complicity and involvement with apartheid South Africa. But I would say that one other thing that always made such a powerful impression on me was that Congressman Dellums, like another great leader for peace, George McGovern, was himself a veteran, and he saw no conflict between the two. He was someone who proudly served in the armed forces of his country and nobly did so, but thought that it was equally noble to fight for peace and to make sure that our defense budget was one that was very closely tethered to the actual military and national security needs of the country, and not one that is bloated and subject to waste and corruption and graft and embezzlement and kickbacks and so on. And that's been an historic struggle that goes back to the very beginning of our republic. We want a military that actually serves the people, that serves the republic, and is not an opportunity for other people to rip off the taxpayers. And he was very focused on making sure that our military budget was really targeted to the actual defense and security of the country, and that America was a force for human rights and security of all peoples and peace all over the world. So he leaves an extraordinary and inspiring and difficult legacy for all of us to live up to. And I'm very proud at this point to turn it over to Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who has become, in her years in office, also a great and famous leader for peace, human rights, and social justice.